Bigfoot. Its existence has been rumored for decades. People swear they've seen Sasquatch, as it's known.
Basically, every single rule of biology was just broken by a creature caught on a spotting telescope in the Wasatch Front.
Seriously, look how big it is. I don't think it is a human. I think it's a Sasquatch.
Wildlife experts are stunned by a figure that ran uphill through 5 feet of snow without even breaking a sweat. This is not a man in a suit, and it is definitely not a bear, as the lean bipedal legs and massive shoulders tell a different story. Nobody expected this to happen, but the evidence is now so overwhelming that even government agencies are taking a second look. If you think you know the truth about Bigfoot, wait until you see the Sawmill footage. Mountainside, sprint across frozen peaks. Experts who spend their lives studying the outdoors do not usually get excited about every shaky video that hits the internet. They have seen enough bears walking on their hind legs and enough guys in cheap gorilla suits to last a lifetime. But something changed recently when a man named John shared his footage from the Wasatch Front. John and his friends were hanging out in a valley about 4,200 feet up when they spotted something moving way up on a peak near 9,000 feet. They had to use a spotting telescope just to see it, and when they realized what it was, they scrambled to get a camera lens against the viewfinder. What they caught was a bipedal creature sprinting horizontally across a steep, snowy slope. Now, here is the catch. The snow up there was about 90 inches deep. That is over 7 feet of frozen powder. If you have ever tried to walk in even a foot of snow, you know how hard it is to move. But this thing was not just walking, it was running effortlessly. It moved across the mountainside and then turned to climb straight up an icy cliff. The power needed to do that is insane. When the researchers got their hands on this, they did not just say wow and move on. They did a real deep dive. They wanted to see if a human could even come close to doing what that creature did. They sent a 6-foot-tall guy named Sky, who is very strong and athletic, to a lower spot with only 18 inches of snow. Sky struggled just to take a few steps. He was huffing and puffing, and he definitely could not run. Now, imagine a creature moving 5 times faster through snow that is 5 times deeper. The math just does not add up for a human or a bear. Bears do not have lean, straight legs that move like that, and they certainly do not run uphill in 90 inches of snow for fun. The research team was completely stunned because this thing looked like a giant athlete in a fur coat. It was easily 7 or 8 feet tall based on how it looked against the trees and the rocks on the peak. The way it moved was more like a professional sprinter than a wild animal. But wait, the story gets even better. A helicopter pilot heard about the video and decided to fly over that exact spot to see if anything was left behind. Even though the wind was blowing hard, he found exactly what he was looking for. There were tracks. Huge, deep footprints were carved into the snow, showing a clear path right where the creature had been seen. The tracks were in a straight line, which is a key detail for Bigfoot researchers. Most animals and humans walk with their feet apart, but these tracks were one right in front of the other, like the creature was walking a tightrope. This is a trait often reported in Sasquatch sightings but almost never seen in fakes, because it is so hard to do while moving fast. The pilot said the tracks were being erased by the wind, but they were definitely there, proving that something heavy and physical had been on that mountain. It makes you wonder what else is hiding up there where humans rarely go, and that is putting it lightly. Because the mountains are not the only place where these giants are making their presence known. Sawmill screams and rotting smells. Most people think of Bigfoot as a creature of the deep woods, but sometimes they get a little too close to human activity for comfort. Down in the southwest side of Virginia, near the Kentucky border, a man named Harley had an experience that changed his life forever. Harley was a skeptic. He did not believe in monsters or myths, but he worked at a sawmill located right against the thick mountain brush. In September of 2020, Harley was working a normal shift when he heard a low, rumbling growl. It was not like a dog or a coyote, it was deep, like it was coming from a massive chest. He looked toward the woodline and saw a figure peeking out from behind a tree on a cliff about 100 yards away. At first, he thought it was a bear because it was dark and hairy, but then it stood up. This thing was easily bigger than Harley, and Harley is 6 feet 6 inches tall. He estimated the creature was much taller and wider, looking strong enough to snap a person like a twig. The crazy part is what happened to his technology. Harley tried to take a photo with his phone, but as soon as he snapped it, the device just died. It did not just run out of battery, it completely fried. To this day, that phone does not work right. This is a common theme in high-level encounters where people report electronic interference. But Harley did not give up. A few nights later, while he was sitting in his truck at the sawmill, he heard something even more terrifying. There were vocalizations echoing through the mountains. They sounded like a mix of screams and a language that nobody could understand. He managed to record some of the audio by putting his phone on the truck compressor. When the Rocky Mountain Sasquatch organization listened to it, they were creeped out. They heard mechanical clicking sounds and deep, guttural moans that did not match any local wildlife. Harley also mentioned a smell that was like rotting eggs or old trash. Bears do not smell like that, but that scent is a famous calling card for the creature often called the skunk ape or Sasquatch. Harley decided to talk to some of the locals at a diner to see if they knew anything. He was a stranger in town, and at first the old-timers did not want to talk. But once they realized he was serious, they told him about the devil monkeys. They said the woods were full of bears and snakes, but there were far worse things in the mountains that the locals had been avoiding for generations. The owner of the sawmill even warned him that the mountains held secrets that were dark and sinister. Harley went from being a total skeptic to a firm believer in less than 2 weeks. He even found tracks near the sawmill a few days before he saw the creature, but he had ignored them, thinking they were just weird holes in the ground. Now he realizes they were footprints from a creature that had been watching him work for days. The thing is, once you realize you are being watched, the whole forest starts to feel a lot smaller. Forest floor blood trails found. If you want to find the real deal, you sometimes have to go looking for trouble, and that is exactly what the Expedition Bigfoot crew does. During one of their trips into the wilderness, a team member named Russell found himself in a situation that would make most people run for the hills. He was tracking what he believed were 2 Bigfoots that had been in a physical fight. He found a trail of blood heading northwest through the thick trees. Now, many people think these creatures are peaceful forest giants, but the evidence Russell found suggested something much more aggressive. He followed the trail for hours, losing contact with his team for over 27 hours. When he finally reconnected with them, he had a crazy story to tell. He had seen a creature darting through the trees that did not look like anything native to the area. The cameraman on the team eventually caught the figure on a powerful lens. When they sat down to analyze the footage, they looked for every reason to call it a bear, but the details just were not there. The creature had lean, straight legs and a very specific arm swing that bears simply do not have. Its head was shaped like a human's but much larger, and it walked with a steady bipedal gait that was way too smooth for a person in a suit. They were in a remote area where a person would have a hard time even surviving, let alone walking around in a heavy costume. The crew was ecstatic because they realized they had captured a humanoid bipedal creature that was far too big to be a human. The blood trail and the fighting suggested a social structure among these beings that we are only just beginning to understand. What most people don't realize is that these creatures might have territories and rivalries just like humans do. Russell noticed that the creature seemed to be avoiding him but also keeping an eye on him. It was a game of cat and mouse in the deep woods. The team used thermal imaging and high-tech gear to confirm that whatever they were looking at was producing a massive amount of body heat, much more than a human could. This supports the idea that Bigfoot has a very high metabolism to survive in the cold wilderness. Every time the experts get closer, the mystery only gets deeper. They found that the creature's footprints near the blood trail were deep enough to suggest it weighed at least 800 pounds. But here's the catch. Even with all that gear, sometimes the best footage comes from a total accident. Backyard campers facing forest giants. Imagine setting up a trail camera on your own property just to see what kind of deer are walking around, only to find a monster on your screen. That is exactly what happened to a camper in the northern United States who thought he was alone in the wilderness. He had a campsite deep in the woods on his land and kept a camera on a tree to monitor the area while he was back in the city. For a long time, he only saw curious deer or the occasional raccoon. But one day, he checked the footage and saw something that made his heart stop. A massive, dark, hairy creature was standing right next to his tent. The creature looked angry. It picked up a huge tree branch and dropped it right onto the man's tent. When you compare the size of the creature to the tent, which was about 5 feet tall, you can see that the beast was at least 8 or 9 feet tall. It had broad shoulders and a head that was way bigger than any human's. Yeah, about that. Most people think these things are shy, but this was a clear display of aggression. It seems like the camper had unintentionally set up his sight in the creature's territory. This kind of territorial behavior is common in many large primates. The creature did not try to eat the tent or go inside. It just seemed to want the intruder gone. The video was short, likely because the camera only recorded for a few seconds after detecting motion, but the impact was huge. The man was so spooked that he moved his entire campsite to a different part of the woods, hoping to stay out of the creature's way. But here's the catch. Moving the tent might not have been enough. Some researchers believe that once one of these beings identifies a human as a trespasser, they will follow that person for miles, watching from the shadows to ensure they actually leave. This is a key detail. They aren't just animals. They seem to have a sense of property and boundaries that rivals our own. This is not the only time a camera meant for animals caught something else. In Alberta, Canada, a camera set up to study wolverines caught a game of peek-a-boo that left biologists stunned. A large buck was peeking from behind a tree, and then it ran off as if it sensed something terrifying. As soon as it left, a massive dark figure moved out from the other side. The creature was crouching, but its head was still higher than the deer's. If it had stood up, it would have been nearly 8 feet tall. Hands down, the most chilling part of this footage is the creature's patience. It waited for the deer to clear the frame before moving, almost as if it knew exactly where the camera's field of vision ended. What most people don't realize is that many trail camera glitches or blurry frames might actually be these creatures moving just fast enough to bypass the sensor's trigger speed. Then there is the mushroom hunter in northern Illinois. Back in 2015, this guy was just recording his hike and looking for mushrooms. He found one with a bite taken out of it and joked that something had just had a snack. Moments later, he heard a scream that sounded like a creature in total pain. It was a loud, guttural yell that did not belong to any wolf or mountain lion. He did what any smart person would do and got out of there immediately. He did not see the creature, but the sound was enough to prove that something big and unknown was very close by. These accidental encounters are often the most believable because the people filming them have absolutely nothing to gain and are usually terrified by what they find. The crazy part is, after he left, he checked the area on a map and realized he was in a patch of woods that local legends had avoided for over 100 years. See, there are even stranger tales floating around the internet that make these look like child's play. Take the case of the Ohio howler caught on a trail cam in 2022. The camera captured a figure that looked almost transparent, a phenomenon some call glimmerman or active camouflage. It moved through the brush like a heat wave, distorting the trees behind it. Wildlife experts were shocked because the motion sensor triggered, but the image showed nothing but a shimmering distortion. It's not that simple, though. When you look closer at the frame by frame, you can see the outline of a massive bipedal creature. This leads to wild theories that these beings aren't just hairy apes, but something with the ability to bend light around their bodies. So, here's the deal. There is another famous clip from the Deep South where a trail camera was ripped off a tree. The last few frames show a giant hairy hand reaching for the lens. The owner found the camera 40 yards away, buried under a pile of rocks. This isn't just an animal being curious. This is deliberate destruction of surveillance. It suggests a level of intelligence that realizes it is being watched. Basically, they know what our tech is, and they don't like it. Another hunter in Pennsylvania reported that his cameras would consistently stop working at exactly 3 in the morning. When he finally retrieved them, the memory cards were wiped clean, but the batteries were full. Nobody expected this to happen, but it points to an electromagnetic field that these creatures might naturally project. And get this, in the Pacific Northwest, a trail cam meant for cougars captured a figure carrying a dead elk over its shoulder. The elk weighed at least 400 pounds, yet the creature was walking upright with total ease. A human would need a team of 3 and a winch to move that carcass, but this giant was strolling through a ravine like it was carrying a backpack. The sheer physical power displayed on these low-resolution sensors is enough to make any wildlife expert rethink the food chain. We like to think we are the top predators, but these silent watchers prove that something much stronger is reclaiming the woods once the sun goes down. Every time a new sensor is placed in the forest, we are essentially inviting a confrontation with a species that has spent centuries perfecting the art of staying hidden. These trail cameras are our only windows into a world that doesn't want to be seen. The thing is, the more tech we throw at the woods, the more aggressive the responses seem to become. From dropping branches on tents to burying cameras, these giants are sending a clear message to the human world. They are not interested in being studied, and they certainly are not interested in sharing their space. So, here's the deal. These stories keep piling up until they form a mountain of evidence that is hard to ignore. Train tracks revealing hidden shadows. The most recent and perhaps most famous footage comes from a man named Brandon, who was riding a scenic train from Florida through southwest Colorado. He was just looking out the window, enjoying the mountains, when he saw something moving that made no sense. He grabbed his phone and started filming. Even though the train was moving and the camera was shaky, the footage is incredibly clear. It shows a large reddish-brown creature walking across a field. Brandon was so shocked by what he saw that he made his Instagram account private because he did not want the fame or the hassle that comes with a Bigfoot sighting. But the details in the video are hard to argue with. The creature has a very specific walk, and the way its fur moves in the wind looks completely natural. It does not look like fabric or a suit. Yeah, about that. Most people focus on the walk, but get this, the hair color is a huge deal. That reddish tint is almost exactly like an orangutan, which some experts say points to an ancient ancestor that crossed over from Asia millions of years ago. But here is the catch. Why would a massive creature be walking right out in the open near a popular tourist train? Some theorists have a pretty wild explanation. They believe these beings actually use train tracks as navigation tools or even energy ley lines. Basically, the long metal rails might act as conductors for electromagnetic energy that these creatures use to move around undetected. The crazy part is that some people think Sasquatch can sense the vibrations of an oncoming train from miles away. They might not be hiding from the train, but instead using the loud noise and the ground shaking to cover their own movements. It is not that simple, though, because Brandon's footage captured the creature during the day, seemingly unbothered by the hundreds of people on board. Brandon grew up hearing stories from his grandpa about the skunk ape in Florida. The skunk ape is basically the southern version of Bigfoot, known for being a bit smaller and smelling a lot worse. Brandon sent the clip to his grandpa right away, and the old man was incredibly excited. It was like a childhood story had finally come to life right in front of his eyes. This region of Colorado has a long history of sightings, and Brandon's footage is now being hailed as some of the best evidence in years. It shows that these creatures are not just hiding in the deepest parts of the woods, they are out there, sometimes right next to tourist tracks and train lines. They are just very good at blending in until someone with a camera happens to look at the right moment. Now, if you want to get into the really wild theories, some researchers believe Brandon did not just hide his social media because of the fame. There are whispers that a specific government unit contacted him within hours of the post going viral. The theory is that the government is fully aware of these creatures and keeps a close eye on their migration patterns. If a creature as big as an 8-foot-tall giant is walking near a public railroad, it is a problem for the people in charge. Some say they are not just animals, but a branch of humanity that was left behind, or even something more high-tech. There is a rumor that these creatures have a natural ability to cloak themselves, making them look like a blur or a tree until they choose to be seen. Brandon might have caught it in a moment where its natural camouflage failed. And that is putting it lightly. Think about the distances involved. If Brandon's grandpa was right about the skunk ape, could these creatures be migrating from the swamps of Florida all the way to the mountains of Colorado? That is a journey of over 2,000 miles. If they are moving that far, they must have a massive network of tunnels or hidden paths that we have never found. Some people think they use the vast cave systems that run under the United States to travel from state to state without ever being spotted by a satellite. There is also the Tatra mountain footage from 2009. A girl named Justina Foulier and her friend were filming near a creek on the border of Poland and Slovakia. They saw something watching them from the trees. As soon as Justina screamed, the creature vanished. Even though the video was shaky because of the adrenaline and the older camera technology, experts believe it shows a primate that should not exist in that region. There are no native apes in that part of Europe, so whatever was watching them was either a very dedicated prankster in a remote area or a real Sasquatch. Hands down, the way that creature retreated into the brush was too fast for a human. It moved like it was part of the forest itself. The crazy part is how similar the Tatra mountain creature looked to the one Brandon filmed in Colorado. Both had that same massive build and a way of moving that looked heavy yet effortless. What most people don't realize is that these sightings are happening on different continents, but the descriptions are almost identical. This leads to the theory that there is a global population of these beings that we have simply failed to categorize. Some believe they are interdimensional travelers that only appear in our world through specific portals. These portals are often said to be located near high altitudes or areas with high mineral content in the soil, like the mountains of Colorado or the peaks of Europe. When you add up all these cases, from the snowy peaks of Utah to the sawmills of Virginia and the train tracks of Colorado, a pattern starts to emerge. We are looking at a highly intelligent, very strong and incredibly elusive species that has managed to survive alongside us for centuries. They are not just random monsters, they are masters of their environment. They know where our cameras are, they know where our trains go, and they usually know how to stay just out of reach. But every once in a while, like with Brandon or Justina, they make a mistake. They step out into the light just long enough for us to realize that the world is much bigger and much stranger than we ever imagined. Could these crystal-clear videos be the final proof we need to admit that Bigfoot is real? If these giants are truly out there, what does that mean for our safety in the wilderness? Tell me what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more shocking wildlife mysteries. Stay curious, and keep your eyes on the woods.